This video will talk about the anatomy of a crochet pattern. I will have my outline notes on my website if you want to refer back to them. This is not just good for beginners who are learning how to read patterns. This is also good for designers to have a guideline to show that, hey, I didn't miss anything in my written pattern. So let's get started. The first part is an obvious part, is the title. This one's called Easy Mittens. I like patterns that are not only creative in their title, but you know what it is. Well, I love the title of this pattern because it not only tells you that it's mittens, but it tells you that they're easy. I don't have a picture of this one. This is a pattern I believe my aunt wrote. She gave me this pattern when I was just a little kid. Okay, the second part of the pattern is description and size. Well, this pattern does not have a written out description. A lot of patterns don't, but the ones that are in magazines often will have a little blurb about what you can use the pattern for. An ad type description, you know, it'll encourage you to make the pattern as a gift for a child or a newlywed, or, you know, their descriptions are all different, so you will see those. Then the next part of the description is your size. An Afghan will tell you how many inches by how many inches it is, or it'll say it'll fit a twin size bed or a crib or whatever. Garment patterns and mittens and things like that will have several sizes. Often, most of the time, they have more than one size in the same pattern. This one, for example, has size 2 to 3, 4 to 5, 6 to 7, and 8 to adult. The thing that looks confusing in the pattern are these brackets. Okay, it says 6 to 7 and 8 to adult are in parentheses. Now, for some reason, my materials only has 2 numbers in brackets. So what I would do is I would think 4 to 5-year-olds would have 2 ounces of the yarn, where 6 to 7 and 8 to adult would have 3 ounces. And here on this one, the different sizes, they use different crochet hooks. So I may have added that later, I'm not sure. But anyway, I digress. So the way you tell what size you're working on, I would go down into the pattern. If I was making the 4 to 5-year-old size, I would go and highlight, after I print it out, highlight all the numbers, the first number inside the brackets. So that way you know exactly what's going on in the pattern. Okay, the third part is a skill level. This pattern doesn't have a skill level, but it tells you right here in the title that it's easy. Alright, let's see. This pattern here, let's see if I can get it moved over to where you can see it. Right here, this is the skill level on this pattern. It has the little bar, and the more bars there is, the harder it is. So this is probably an easy to medium pattern, whereas the Prairie Star went too far. This one has 3 stars, but it tells you straight up, advanced experience and patience required. So that's how you can tell the skill levels. And like I said, not all patterns will have your skill levels on it. So that's when you have to look down, glance through the pattern, and look at what the stitches are, And if there's any shaping involved, then if you've not done shaping, or if you have not done some of the stitches that are in the pattern, you might want to practice them before you try it. The fourth part I have on my list here is the materials. I like this pattern because it just says knitting worsted yarn. That means, in today's terms, that's the size 4 medium worsted weight yarn. And so I know exactly what kind of yarn I need if I have it in my stash already. This pattern here, this is a vintage pattern from an old book. This one tells you to use Colombian Minerva Skylark sports yarn. Well, this one tells you the name of the company who makes the yarn, but you can substitute other sports yarns for this pattern. So sports weight is a number 3 in your yarn sizing, and the Prairie Star, this one says Red Heart Super Saver. Okay, now if you don't have Red Heart yarn and you don't know what size Super Saver yarn is, I happen to know it's medium worsted weight yarn, or size 4. But let's say it's a yarn that's been discontinued and you don't know what size yarn it is. Well, what you can do is, your clue is the next point that I want to make. And that is the size hook you need, which says I or 9, and the gauge. So the way you can tell if the yarn you have is going to work is you will take the size hook they recommend and make a swatch. And this one here, it just says to make you make a motif. What you would do is make one of the diamonds in the Prairie Star and measure it. And if it comes out close to the right size, then you know you have it, and you may need to adjust your hook size just a little bit. If it's way off, you probably have the wrong thickness of yarn. This one here, the gauge is very simple. 4 single crochet is 1 inch and 5 rows is 1 inch. And I think that would be with a J hook, because usually F and G make a lot smaller stitches than that. Let's see what else is here. Afghan stitch. This one gives you a nice clear gauge. 6 stitches, 1 inch, 4 rows equals 1 inch in the feather stitch pattern. So that leads me to the next part of the anatomy of a crochet pattern, which is notes and special stitches. This one here has what the feather stitch pattern requires is multiple of 4 stitches plus 2, which means that's how many chains you need to make that pattern repeat. This one has a note, tells you to work with the Afghan hook, and you know, and it has the notes on that. Easy mittens. It doesn't really have any notes. It just shows that you're going to start at the palm. The lily pattern. It has a note that your chain 3. Make it bigger. That your chain 3 counts as a double crochet at the beginning of the round. So you want to look over that before you get started on your pattern and make sure you don't miss something, because I have a pattern that the note is later in the pattern and it tells you to work with 2 strands throughout the pattern, and if you get started before you see that note, then you end up having to tear it out. Then see, we went over special stitches. Then the directions, and they usually begin with a note saying where you're starting, like the easy mittens shows that you're starting with the palm, and it has your foundation chain of these numbers here depending on what size you're making. Sometimes you start with a ring at the center of your work. Okay, now we're going to talk more about these brackets. I'm going to review that again. For these mittens, the smallest size is this one right here. The next size bigger is this number. The next size bigger is the 27. The next size bigger is the 29. And you might have to look back up here to the top. 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 to adult. And the smallest is 2 to 3 years. And again, highlight which size you're going to be working on throughout your pattern. Just kind of go down through the pattern, highlight if you're going to make the 4 to 5 year size. Go ahead and highlight that first number inside the brackets so that you're not confused when you're working on your pattern. There are some patterns that have even more than this. They have 8 or 9 sizes, which can really get confusing if you're somewhere in the middle of those brackets. Stars and symbols marks a place for a repeat. See, does this one have one? No. Let me find one that does. I think the Prairie Star did. Yes. Okay, let me zoom in here. Okay. See the star right here? That's a place for a repeat. What you do is when you're working on it, you just go ahead and work ignoring the stars, and then later when you come down to this part, it'll tell you to repeat from the star to double star. So you only do it once when it just doesn't say how many times. And then sometimes it'll tell you to repeat it 3 or 4 times. Okay. Then these brackets here are not since this is a one size pattern, it's not indicating different sizes. These brackets here will tell you to do this group of stitches in one space. So the 3 double crochet, chain 4, 3 double crochet all go into the chain 3 space. And that's what those brackets mean. Sometimes it'll have brackets and it'll tell you to do this 3 times. Let's see if this one has it. Yeah, this one uses stars. That one's the brackets are sizes. I don't have a sample up of when it happens, but sometimes your brackets will have a bracket and then it'll say 4 times. On my notes in the anatomy I have a sample. Okay. Oh, that's really zoomed in. Okay, here we go. So this one here, for my sample, I have 2 double crochet, chain 2 double crochet 4 times. That means you do this in each of the next 4 stitches. So you do that many times, okay? You got to pay attention to where the comma and periods are in your pattern, because getting this wrong could change the whole look of the pattern. Let's go to Easy Mittens. Like this one here, it says skip first single crochet in each single crochet across. Okay, if you just take out that comma, it might get confusing and you might think you have to do 2 single crochet. You know, they're just different things. If you have to read it, follow and use the punctuation. Okay. Hyphenated terms. Okay. Let's see, I think there's one in the Prairie Star. Yeah, right here. See where it says chain 4 space? It says all in chain 4 space. Well, that hyphenated means that's the space. That's not telling you to make it 4 chains. That is describing the space that's coming up. There will have been 4 chains in the previous round. It makes a space. This one down here, where it says chain 3, join to top of chain 3. It's not join to top chain 3. There's no comma there. So you know that they're talking about the stitch. And this one, the chain 3, is the one that you chain to turn, or to go to the next round, not to turn. But some of them you would chain 3 to turn. The next step is schematics. Okay, it's up here. Zoom out. This is a schematic of a sleeve. A schematic of a sleeve is like a map or a blueprint of what you're working on. It'll have measurements on how wide and how long an item is, that sort of thing, and it often looks like a sewing pattern. Another schematic could be a graph. We'll have a graph within the schematic. Prairie Star. It has a chart and a schematic. It doesn't tell you size, but it shows a layout of how it's going to be put together. And then you also have charts and graphs. A chart, I don't have a sample out on my computer, so I'm going to just grab this Crochet Today magazine. This one has charted patterns, and these will be symbols that stand for stitches, and it actually looks like the finished pattern. This is the January-February 09 Crochet Today magazine. I pulled that out for that. And there's a whole nother lesson involved in reading the symbol crochet, and that'll be down the road a little ways. And abbreviations that are the crochet terms. Not all patterns will have your abbreviations. This one does not, but this Lily pattern does. It's like a stitch. It's called a stitch glossary on this one, and it'll have what each of those little abbreviations mean. It's really a good idea to know these before you start a pattern, but memorizing them will happen when you do make your pattern. And that's pretty much what you're going to find in a crochet pattern. I hope this was helpful. I went through it rather fast. You can play it back. You can go to the website and look at my notes. And I'll try to get some more examples up with the notes. It won't be right away, but because I have to get permissions from publishers to use their things. So that's the anatomy of a crochet pattern, and I just want to tell you happy crocheting.